In the summer of 1845, Henry David Thoreau moved from his home in the village of Concord to a simple cabin he built on the shores of Walden Pond. He remained at Walden for 2 years, living simply, deliberately, close to the earth. And the story of Thoreau's retreat at Walden is the stuff of legend. It helped launch the modern environmental movement and has inspired generations of nature lovers all around the world. I myself was inspired by Thoreau's Walden when I first read it in college, and it's inspired me ever since. But lately, I've been wondering if this story that's so important to American environmentalism, so important to Unitarian Universalism, for Thoreau as an ancestor of ours, so important to New England, if this story we tell about Thoreau at Walden serves us anymore. As we face this existential threat of climate change, does it serve us still to tell a story of a white guy who kind of retreats from the world to get in touch with nature? Is that the story we need right now? Does that story offer us any wisdom or insight as we face a potential climate catastrophe? I'm not so sure it does. But what if we included in our telling of Thoreau's story a shocking detail that often gets left out of the history books, which is that a year before he moved to his cabin at Walden, Thoreau almost destroyed the very forest with which his name is now synonymous. He nearly burned it all down. For me, this significant detail casts the Walden story in a whole new light. Maybe it's not just a story about some guy dropping out and getting back to land. Maybe Walden is instead a story about how one person tried to atone for his environmental sins and repair his broken relationship with the earth. Now that's a story I think we probably could use right now, don't you think? I mean, let me put it this way. If one of the world's most storied environmentalists started out by nearly burning down the forest that he's famous for having loved, well, then maybe there's hope for the rest of us, right? Hope that we can repair our broken relationship with the earth, atone for our sins, and tackle this climate crisis before it's too late. Thoreau's story offers us a parable, I think, for how we might meet the challenge of climate change with spiritual resilience and moral agency. And so as we celebrate Earth Day, let's hear with new ears this story of Thoreau at Walden, and see what lessons it might offer us anew. So it was right about this time of year, the last day of April in 1844, when a young Henry David Thoreau set out in a boat with a friend intending to make a camping and fishing trip up the Concord River. The pair hadn't gone far when they pulled ashore to cook up some fish they'd caught for lunch. They landed their boat on a patch of forest that the people of Concord called, and still call, Walden. At the time, it was one of the last pristine woodlands remaining in the area. The people of Concord cherished Walden for its beauty and depended on it for their survival. Timber from the Walden woods kept their stoves lit through the New England winter. So the two young men found a hollowed-out stump by the river's edge, and they built a campfire to fry up their catch. But that April, Massachusetts had experienced near-record heat and drought. And a breeze blew sparks from the fire into some nearby grass. The young men tried to stomp out the fire with their boots, but the wind kicked up and fanned the flames, sending them up a valley and into the woods. And just on the other side of those woods lay the village of Concord itself. The fire was heading straight for it. Thoreau later described in his journal the fear and the panic that seized him in that moment. We felt we had no control over this demonic creature to which we had given birth. It went leaping and cracking wildly toward the wood. The young men sounded the alarm, shouting, "Walden's burning!" But before help could arrive, the fire spread and the forest billowed with smoke. Pine trees burst into flames. Small animals fled the woods, chased by the surging fire. At one point, Thoreau himself was nearly consumed by the whipping flames. Hearing the alarm, the people of Concord rushed to the woods and together with Thoreau battled the fire. They cut trenches with their hoes and set controlled burns. And by late afternoon, the fire was extinguished. The village and its people spared, but not before the fire had consumed more than 100 acres of mature pine and birch and oak. Later that day, when it was all over, a shaken Thoreau walked back through the charred remains of the forest to the site of his campfire. Had it all just been a terrible dream? But there was his fish, perfectly broiled in the hollowed-out stump. Though disaster was averted, the fire was a costly and traumatic experience for the people of Concord, and many directed their anger at Thoreau. Town officials threatened him with prosecution. And for months, his neighbors called him names behind his back, names he overheard and recorded in his journal. Damned rascal. Careless flibbertigibbet. Woods burner. Mild by today's standards, to be sure, but still, they stung. Thoreau's journals reveal his own complicated emotional response to the harm that he'd done. His neighbor's name-calling provoked in him a prickly defensiveness. Who are these people? I know the woods better and should feel the loss more than any of them. Other times he tried to minimize the damage he'd done. I set fire to the forest, but I've done no wrong. These flames are but consuming their natural food. In the end, though, Thoreau's defensiveness was really just a cover for his deep sense of remorse. I feel like a guilty person, he wrote. Nothing but shame and regret. Now, Thoreau's relationship with Walden could have ended right there, right? Hurt, despairing, filled with regret for what he'd done, he could have just walked away from that scarred landscape. But he didn't. In the summer, that very summer, he returned to the charred forest and wrote this. In the spring, I burned over 100 acres till the earth was sere and black. But by midsummer, this space was clad in a fresher and more luxuriant green than the surrounding woods. Shall man then despair? Is he not a sproutland too? Within a year, Thoreau moved to his cabin in those very woods and began work on his environmental classic, Walden. The study of how forests regenerate themselves and evolve would become a lifelong passion of his. You know, friends, it seems to me that we, right now, find ourselves in a situation not unlike Thoreau's. We ourselves could look around and survey the damage that we've wrought upon the earth, right? Contemplate the damage that is surely still to come, and turn from it all in despair and regret and shame. We could throw up our hands and point fingers and call one another names. Or we could do what Thoreau did. We could confront the damage we've done. We could walk through the devastated landscapes and discover there fresh signs of life, resilience, cause for hope. Like Thoreau, we could acknowledge our grief and remorse and instead of being paralyzed by it, use it as an impetus for us to make fundamental changes in our behavior and in our relationship to the earth. Do you see how how the story of Thoreau and Walden changes when we take the fire into account? In this light, it's hard not to see Thoreau's time at Walden, at least in part, as an act of atonement, right? An attempt to right a wrong, to repair and reclaim his broken relationship with the earth. Thoreau had always been a nature lover. From the time he was a little boy, he'd roamed and romped the Walden woods. But after the shock and grief of the fire, it's as if he needed a powerful reset in his relationship with the earth. During his 2 years at the cabin, Thoreau woke with the sun and bathed each morning in the waters of Walden, walked the woods for hours, and lived simply off the land. But even after he left his cabin, Thoreau continued the practice of walking the Walden woods for 4 hours a day, nearly every day, for the rest of his life. And you know, this wasn't just about exercise for Thoreau. He wasn't just trying to get his steps in, right? The walks were an intentional spiritual practice, a way to cultivate a patient, grateful, loving attention to the earth, to its rhythms and cycles. He studied bird song and animal life. He carried a notebook and pencil to record the precise date that various plants and trees blossomed each year. So thorough were his records. That's actually an old Thoreau joke. So thorough were his records that, yeah, thank you, thanks. So thorough were his records that to this day, climate scientists use his data to track the effects of global warming on the forests of eastern Massachusetts. Now, few of us can set aside 2 years for a retreat in the woods, or even walk 4 hours a day. But at a time when our relationship with the earth is broken, what steps might we take to rekindle a sense of intimacy, connection, and gratitude for the earth? To increase our knowledge and awareness of the earth. By themselves, these practices won't save our planet. But they're part of the spiritual work that I believe is necessary to sustain us, to keep us joyful and resilient as we work to protect life on earth. Right? Now, the actual work of protecting life on earth looks like something different. And this is another reason that I like including the fire in the Walden story. Thoreau in his cabin will never save the world. But the people working together in solidarity and common cause, well, they sure can. We sure can. And for me, one of the most hopeful and redemptive moments in the story comes when the call goes out that Walden is burning, and the people of Concord drop everything and pick up their hoes and dig their trenches and stand in line to haul buckets of water. When faced with a mortal threat to their ecosystem, to their community, to their very homes and lives, the good people of Concord briefly choose solidarity and collective action. And that's what saves them in the end, right? Now, sadly, it seems their solidarity quickly devolved into finger-pointing and name-calling and recrimination. But for a moment, they were a people united in common cause. So I think we would do well to examine our own tendencies in this regard. When it comes to the climate crisis, how much time do we spend in our armchairs pointing fingers or blaming others? And how much time do we spend working with others on meaningful, collective, large-scale solutions to avert this crisis? For therein lies the difference between climate catastrophe and the promise of a livable future. Friends, Walden is burning. The fire is headed our way, and it threatens us, our communities, and everything we love. The only way we will avert this crisis is if we heed the alarm and join together in meaningful, powerful collective action. But unlike Walden, this isn't a fire that'll be put out in just an afternoon. It's a fire generations in the making. It'll take generations to repair. So let us also, along the way, cultivate resilient and hopeful and courageous souls. Souls that can engage this struggle over the long haul by tending to our grief, by nurturing our gratitude for and connection to the earth, and by loving one another. Only then will we make of our Walden not an inferno, but maybe a paradise. Only then will we, like Thoreau, make Walden our home. May it be so, and amen.